shut up. The footy's on Triple M.
This is a Triple M Footy News Update.
This is massive, this story. Got a little exclusive.
With Tom Brown.
It's Monday, July the 12th, and after a weekend of remarkable upsets in round 17, it's time for a Triple M Footy News Update with Tom Brown. My name's Rudy, and I've got Tommy here to go through all the big news from the weekend. How are you travelling, Tommy?
Yeah, very good, Rudy. A massive weekend. It posed all sorts of questions and results. Can't wait to go through all that this morning. Some interesting news also regarding Sydney and the Giants. That's getting bigger and bigger, that issue about them not being able to get back to Sydney.
Indeed. Now, let's start at Richmond. They lost again on the weekend. That's 4 losses in a row. They were 29 points up at one stage against Collingwood, shipped 7 goals to 1 in the last quarter to lose by 16. And the question on everyone's lips, Tommy, is the era over?
It looks like it probably is. They're 12th on the ladder this morning. As you mentioned, Collingwood, the big victors yesterday, 7 goals in the last quarter. They won in the end by 16 points. Richmond giving up that huge 29-point lead. The Tigers have now lost to the Saints, the Gold Coast and St Kilda. Just 4 players yesterday, Rudy, that had 20 touches or more. You're not going to win many games on that basis. Trent Cotchin, an incredible career at the moment. He looks out of position and potentially finished and certainly banged up. I think he had 13-odd touches yesterday. And Damien Hardwick was asked about Cotchin's position and form post-game.
Look, I'd love to manage him, to be honest. He's a battering ram. He's played like that for 15 years at the highest level. And, the game has changed. There's no doubt about that. It is more, uncontested marks. We're seeing a lot of it at the moment. And so the ball is chipped sideways and around and all that sort of stuff. So there's not a lot of, stoppage contest type things that are his strengths. So we sort of have spoken about what we can look at the, moving him in a different position, but we need him to play midfield at the moment.
Interesting comments. Now, Richmond have got Brisbane on Friday night. It's not getting any easier for the Tigers, and it doesn't look like they'll get any of their key players back. I'm a glass half full person on all this, Rudy. The competition is not set up for sustained success. The Tigers have won 3 flags in 4 years. You take that any day of the week with personalities, with form, with contracts, with the salary cap, with a whole bunch of factors. Just drive, like getting out of bed and wanting it again and again and again, with injuries in particular. Time changes.
Now, while Richmond struggled yesterday, Tommy, we may have just seen the emergence of a new developer for this season.
Yeah, the Swans. The question now, whether they're a genuine premiership chance. It looks like it off the back of their Bulldogs win yesterday, 19 points. But as Bevo was asked on that, said there are 6 rounds to go, so there's a bit to play out, obviously. But I was very, very impressed again with their midfield. Lloyd, Mills, Parker, they just rack up 25-plus consistently. Buddy was relatively quiet yesterday, kicked a few behinds. Even Heaney was relatively quiet. So they're not relying on any particular part of the ground, but their midfield's got grunt and they're tough. And as Bevo said, they really beat the Bulldogs sort of at their own game. Now, Sydney involved in one of the big issues today, Sydney and the Giants, with the border closure yesterday and 112 cases just recorded now this morning. The New South Wales Premier speaking as we speak. Sydney can't get back and the Giants can't get back to Sydney. They can't play in Canberra, which was their backup venue this weekend. Their families can't easily get down here. The AFL and the Players Association's focus has turned to the welfare of the families because Sydney and the Giants packed up with short notice. It's obviously putting some families in a pretty difficult position. For example, particularly the players with and the officials with young kids and obviously their partners back in Sydney. And the AFL behind the scenes working on a plan now to try and get these families down to do 14 days quarantine because there's a real chance now that Sydney and the Giants will be here for the rest of the season, which looks for Sydney's sake like it'll include, hopefully for their sake, finals. So that's what's going on this morning just from a news perspective. Canberra is not a viable backup venue this weekend. I understand that game will be in Ballarat, I'm told. Now that's TBD, to be decided. But I think there's that, what do they call it? The bridge. The Battle of the Bridge.
The Battle of the Bridge, that's it.
That'll be the Battle of the Bridge will be in Ballarat, Rudy.
Ah, yes. Lovely part of the world, Ballarat. On the other side of that game's equation, Tommy, the Dogs, they didn't quite click, did they?
That was Bevo's words. They didn't click forward of the centre. Jamara, a lot of focus on Ugle-Hagen's debut, had 7 touches. Had company, Cody Waitman, who's much heralded and exciting, only had 5 touches, kicked 0 goals, 1. I thought Jamara showed glimpses, but Bevo was asked post-game if Jamara would sort of automatically, for the sake of experience, get another game. This was Bevo's response.
Johnny Northey, one of my great mentors and old coaches who coached me at Melbourne, had a philosophy to make sure that debutants played the second week, and I definitely didn't deserve my second week, and he gave it to me. But I don't really mirror that philosophy that Swooper had. We need to make sure we field a team that's going to win the game, and it's got enough experience in it as well. So we'll wait and see on Mara. Obviously, we'll probably get Norts back next week, and that influences how many tours we play.
Clearly missing Norton, there's no doubt about that. Just in terms of Jamara, I noticed the Herald Sun ran a picture this morning posted by Mia Favola of Mia and Jamara just doing a couple of nice pictures in the rooms post the loss yesterday, Rudy. I guess there might be some debate this week as to whether they need to be posting those pictures from inside the rooms post-loss, but I guess that's a different generation and that's up to them.
Indeed. I personally think that any debut, AFL debut, is worth celebrating. But I understand your point on the optics of it. Let's get on to some burning issues out of round 17. Tommy, Carlton on the weekend, competitive against the Cats, but inaccuracy cost them.
Yeah, Grant Thomas and I think Matty Lloyd on the Footy Show yesterday basically saying the inaccuracy in a sense was selfish. I'm not too sure. They're better placed than me to comment on that, but they were certainly inaccurate on the weekend. Having said that, they were very accurate the week before the Blues. In terms of what that loss means, I think the focus will be on their goal kicking this week, in particular Mackay, who keeps doing those snaps from funny angles that traditionalists like me don't like. Even Brendan Favola, I think, Instagrammed or tweeted, just kick it with a drop punt.
Well, I mean, he's leading the Coleman, so it's been working for him most of the year.
It has, and it also improves perhaps their skills from the boundary line where they sort of snag those shots. But anyway, in terms of what it meant for David T, probably not too much. They did hold Geelong to about 70 points from 56 inside entries, which is pretty good. I know how much the coaches love the defensive stats. Yeah. I've also heard over the weekend that Mark Lagudache, and there could be a tug of war at Carlton on this, Mark Lagudache, the current president, not the incoming president, Luke Sayers, the current president, Mark Lagudache does not want to see another coach during the remainder of his tenure at the club, which expires in October or November. So I think Teague's okay for the moment. They've got a massive game against the Pies this week. That shapes into off the back of the Pies' good quarter yesterday and Carlton's reasonable form. I say reasonable form, it's okay. It should be an interesting game. Should be very, very interesting indeed. The other team in that game, Geelong, their coach Chris Scott has come out hugely in favour of shorter quarters, Tommy. Chris Scott, again this year, has come out in favour of shorter quarters. He's got a vested interest in all this, not questioning Scott, one of the smartest people in the game, but he's got the oldest list. He's got Delhouse and Selwood banged up at the moment. He's got the likes of Dangerfield and Smith and Higgins running around. They're not getting any younger, those blokes, so I don't think it's any surprise that Chris Scott wants shorter games. Having said that, he did explain that he was looking forward to Monday Night Football and the spectacle of Thursday night, things that would improve the spectacle, according to Chris Scott. What's also interesting there, through no fault of Scott's, is that his new boss, Steve Hocking, who's the incoming CEO to the Cats at the end of the year, the current AFL footy boss, he was the one that put the quarters back to 20 minutes, which they've been for the history of football, mind you. And Brad Scott, who I think will probably get the footy ops job, as Chris's brother. So he'll have a couple of people on speed dial there that he can call with these rather forthright views about the length of the quarters. Yes, indeed. Now, St Kilda is another team I wanted to discuss here. They are hugely back in the finals race after a remarkable win over Brisbane in Brisbane. Yeah, one of the upsets of the season. Gold Coast. On the Gold Coast. Yeah. So the Saints have had 3 wins in a row now. It looked like their season was absolutely shot. They're having all sorts of issues, scoring issues and all the like. But they've been really buoyed over the weekend by the form of some of the younger guys like Burns and King and Highmore and Connolly. 3 of those guys, Burns, Highmore and Connolly, not necessarily household names, but they're going really well. Their depth players, McKenzie, Dunstan, Kent and Long, are sort of growing, I think, in the view of the club in the absence at the moment of guys like Hanbury, Gresham, Patton, Higgins and Geary, who are huge outs, admittedly. Just on Hanbury, he played for Sandringham yesterday and got through his the club allocated 70 minutes, so he didn't suffer any further soft tissue issues. So hopefully Hannahs can come back relatively soon. I'd like to see him play. He's a good player. Yes, indeed. Been a start for a long time. Now, another upset from the weekend. Gold Coast 1-point winners in Ballarat. I loved watching this game yesterday. I thought the final quarter was awesome between GWS and the Suns. There was an old-fashioned breeze. Toby Green couldn't kick against it from the boundary. Had a kick with about a minute to go to put the Giants back in front. It's a damaging loss from the Giants' finals perspective, but a massive boost for Stuart Dew. My info is the club bosses do want to see Dew coach, but they also want progress, and the Suns have now demonstrated that in 2 weeks in a row, beating Richmond and then the Giants. So Big Stewie's on the right path in that regard. Interesting
the Giants are an interesting club because now they've lost to Gold Coast and North, but they've also had a great win over Melbourne recently. It's difficult to know exactly where GWS are at.
Just a couple of injuries from there. Lockie Whitfield got a head knock, went off with concussion, passed his concussion test according to the Giants, but gets migraines, and he got a migraine post that knock. So they think that maybe he wanted to serve the 12 days, but they'll obviously work through that with the AFL medical staff today. And Greenwood did his ACL off the back of Hipwood's ACL Saturday night, so it was a bad week for knee injuries.
Yeah, indeed. Our thoughts go out to those guys. Now, Port Adelaide is a team I just want to touch on briefly. Tough loss against Melbourne on Thursday night, and it's just getting more and more difficult. So they just can't beat the big good sides.
The issue at Port now is that Adelaide has beaten more top 8 sides this year than Port Adelaide. There looks like there's a gap between Port and the top 4 or 5 sides if you include Sydney in all that. The issue for Ken Hinkley is he got recontracted off the back of such a promising year last year. He's got 2.5 years to run on that contract. But there's sort of, not a promise, but like a dialogue between him and Koshy that they're sort of premiership threats. So Ken will have to start at some point getting more out of his elite players. Otherwise, you'd think there would be some questions asked. He's into his 10th year next year as the coach. He's a beauty, Ken, but they're just. I think the collective view, Rudy, if you'd agree, is that they're capable of more than they're showing.
Feels like they should have a higher ceiling than they show off at times. Now, GWS, we mentioned before, Josh Kelly, you've unearthed some confusing details about his contract.
I've unearthed some confusing details, Rudy, and you'll laugh at this because you'll think it raises more questions than it answers. But that's my point, and that's the question and points being raised by other clubs and other agents and other list managers as we speak. I unearthed on Friday, and it's been discussed that Josh Kelly's got the most discussed contract perhaps in AFL history. A 2-year contract with an 8-year option. That 8-year option worth over $1 million a year, where Kelly can just rock up, sign the option and say, I'm staying at the Giants from 26 to 27 for 8 years. You pay me over $1 million a year, I'm staying, and that's the option. 8 years at $1 million plus. What I've discovered is that option, that 8-year document, is not an option. It's officially an offer that was never lodged with the AFL. That's all it is. It's stored in a drawer somewhere, and up to a certain date in time, Kelly can accept that offer and sign the 8-year deal. The question that other clubs are asking is that binding? And if it's not binding, the Giants could potentially pull out of that or try and renegotiate that, or it would be easier for them to do that. They might have salary cap pressure with Cornelio, Kelly, a whole bunch. They might have to lose a player. So there's that aspect to it. And if it's just in Kelly's favour that he can just go and sign this so-called offer, then if it's a unilateral offer, surely that's an option that should have been lodged with the AFL. Now, I think Kelly's camp's very comfortable with this deal. I think they did a similar deal with Gaff before. The AFL's, I believe, comfortable with the way the deal's been set up. But other clubs are asking, well, how does it work under free agency? How would it work under free agency compensation? And if, as I said, Kelly can just exercise this so-called offer and the Giants are bound by it, surely it should have been lodged with the AFL. So it's raising big questions in clubland. The more practical side of it is, could North or another club now more easily not necessarily match that offer, but just offer their own deal to Josh? So, for example, for a shorter term. So it's got all sorts of questions in terms of whether it should have been lodged, the free agency implications, whether it's binding, whether it's all been done to the letter of the AFL rules. They're questions that are being asked out there in high levels at clubland.
Yeah, I've got to say, I'm really interested to find out what those answers are, because I'm struggling to make sense of it, Tommy.
You need to be a law professor to break all that down. Having said that, we don't have the documents in front of us. But seriously, it's a very interesting issue.
Indeed, you have to have gone to legal school to.
But the Bombers and North in particular will be scratching their heads at that, going, well, what does this mean for us?
Yeah.
Can we do it? Does that mean we can get Kelly more easily and for a better deal than what's being discussed?
Yeah, indeed. On the back of that confusing one, Tommy, I think we'll probably just leave it there for the day. You'll be back Wednesday to talk about all the rest of the footy news. I'm sure COVID is not going away anytime soon, so we'll be talking about that and more.
Can't wait, Rudy.
Yeah, indeed. Thanks heaps for coming in, and we'll see you next time.
Cheers, mate.